Hello, my Christian brothers and sisters. It is July 1st. And as we continue through this summer, we also continue through the book of Daniel. This is a reader's guide to the book of Daniel. So we're not going to read it during this study. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary, a review, what to watch for, the main point, so that you can read this chapter on your own. We've gone through 4 chapters already. The videos are there for you if you would like to watch them. And now we have chapter 5. Chapter 5, the book of Daniel, is entitled The Hand. You might have heard before the phrase, the hand was writing on the wall. Well, that comes from this story in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 5. So in 10 minutes or less, we are going to get into it. Here's your review. The first 4 chapters of the book of Daniel are written during the time of King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar reigns for quite a few years as the king of the empire of Babylon. But now in chapter 5, the story has moved on into the reign of King Belshazzar. King Belshazzar is certainly less prominent than Nebuchadnezzar, but now Daniel is going to be getting a little bit old. It is at the end of the Babylonian Empire. Daniel is probably at least 80 years old by now, if not older. It's kind of hard to determine exactly what age he was because we don't know exactly what age he was when he started in Babylon. He was certainly a young man, probably a teenager, and now by this time he is going to be relatively old. Daniel has been around for a while, and his ability to interpret dreams, to explain riddles, to solve all kinds of different problems is still known by some in the kingdom. He certainly is not as prominent as he once was, but you'll see in this chapter that there are still some who remember exactly what Daniel can do. What I want you to watch for in this particular chapter, Nebuchadnezzar is referenced as Belshazzar's father a number of times. Nebuchadnezzar is not Belshazzar's father. Belshazzar's father is a man named Nabonidus who kind of usurped the throne, and then he was exiled and kind of kicked out, and Belshazzar took over. You don't really need to know that historical information. But I do want you to understand this. Sometimes the word father can mean predecessor. Belshazzar is the king of Babylon. And so Nebuchadnezzar being called his father or his predecessor is just legitimizing Belshazzar's reign. Don't get confused by it. Just understand that he was the predecessor of Belshazzar years before. Now Belshazzar is the rightful ruler of the kingdom as far as the people are concerned. In this story, you have a hand appearing out of nowhere and writing words on a wall. A strange thing, a crazy thing for those people to see at that time. And like I had mentioned before, this lends itself to that common phrase that is still used in our language today. Well, the hand was writing on the wall. That simply means that, well, it was inevitable. It was going to happen. You saw it coming. This is where it comes from, this very story. But my question is this: why do you think the Lord sent his message that he wanted people to hear in this strange way? Keep that in mind. The words that are written on the wall mean certain things. Now, depending on the translation that you're reading, it may give you meanings in the footnotes. And so take a look at those little tiny letters next to those words in your Bible translation. And depending on what translation you have, it might give you a little bit different meaning to those words. Mene means measured, tekel means weighed, peres means divided. And you'll see how that is interpreted by Daniel, who makes an appearance in the story to show Belshazzar and the rest of the people there exactly what the Lord had in mind. and what he was predicting for the future. What is the main point of Daniel chapter 5? God does not appreciate when his name is desecrated and his glory is stolen. He will exact justice in the end. Belshazzar and the people with him were not giving glory to the Lord. In fact, they were doing just the opposite. And the Lord was not going to take that lying down. Now, the Lord is very patient with people. The Lord allows sinful behavior to go on for quite an extended period of time from our standpoint. But the Lord will make sure that justice is meted out in the end. You see that here in chapter 5. So what does this chapter have to do with my life? Because God holds your life and your ways in his hands, it is pleasing to him when you acknowledge his power and trust in his grace. The Lord doesn't need a pat on the back. The Lord is not looking for an attaboy. The Lord does love your praise, though. He loves your trust. He loves your love. And so he wants to make sure that you as a Christian are showing him that praise and thanks, gratitude and appreciation all the time, remembering who is it that guards you and protects you, provides for you and saves you. He is going to do everything he can to make sure that you do not forget that. It's time to read Daniel chapter 5 in your own Bible translation. If you have questions, if you have comments, remember, email me at any time. I check my email all day, every day, probably more often than I should, but I want to make sure that I'm connected as often as I can to you and your questions. So please let me know what you're thinking, and I'll help you through it. Have a good rest of the day. Have a great first kind of half a week of July, and the Lord bless your study of his word.